Hi, I'm Kevin. Today we're going to talk about the history and the rules of the game Canasta. So, what is Canasta?
Hi, I'm Marina, and I'm going to tell you about the history of canasta. So what is canasta? The word canasta is actually Spanish for basket. Now why would someone call a card game basket? Well, in 1939, there was a lawyer named Segundo Santos who liked to play bridge. He finally realized that he was so addicted to bridge that it was hurting his career. So he switched to playing rummy instead. This was better, but he thought that rummy depended too much on chance. So with the help of his bridge partner, architect Albert Serrato, he developed a new game, which he called Canasta. Why did he name his card game Canasta? No reason, it was completely arbitrary. Canasta began to become popular even as it was being invented, and it quickly spread across Uruguay into Argentina through Argentinian tourists. Because of World War II, it didn't spread outside of South America. However, when the war was over, it spread to the United States, and then across the world. In the 50s, Canasta was the world's most popular card game. For a time, Canasta was so popular that it threatened to overthrow bridge as the premier card game in the United States. However, it eventually declined.
Now you know about the history of the game. Let's talk about the rules of the game. The two most important terminologies in the game are meld and canasta. Let's look at each of them in turn. A meld refers to 3 or more cards of the same type. So for example, this would be considered to be a meld of 3 jacks. And let's see, this would be a meld of 5 eights. Now, in this game, 2s and jokers are wild cards. They can be added to any meld to increase its size. So if I take this joker and add it to this meld of 3 jacks, then this is considered to be a meld of 4 jacks. A canasta is a meld with 7 or more cards in it. So, for example, if I were to take these 2 2s and add it to this meld of 5 eights, then together we have a canasta of 8s. We show that it is a canasta by collecting the cards together and putting them in a pile, like so. So now you know about melds and canastas. Let's talk about what you do on your turn. On your turn, you're going to face the deck and the discard pile. You have 2 choices at the beginning of your turn. You can either draw 2 cards from the top of the deck and add it to your hand, or you can try to pick up the entire discard pile. Now, you can always choose to draw 2 cards from the deck, but you can only choose to pick up the entire discard pile under certain conditions. You can choose to pick up the entire discard pile if you can use the top card of the discard pile in a meld. So, for example, right now, the top card in the discard pile is a 5, and I have 2 5s in my hands. So, I can make that into a meld and take the entire discard pile into my hand. Alternatively, if the top card was not a 5 and was a 9, I can still pick up the discard pile, because I can use the 2 and the 9 to make a meld with the top 9 and take the rest of the pile. Now, there's a third way in which you can pick up the discard pile. Let's say that the top card was, say, a jack, and this is the discard pile, and this is my hand, and say I have a meld of jacks already placed on the table. In this case, I can still pick up the discard pile, because I can add this one to an existing meld on the table. So in total, there's 3 ways to pick up the discard pile. Either you have 2 of the same cards, use that to make a meld, or you have 1 of the matching cards and a wild card, which will allow you to make a meld, or you already have a meld of that top card, and you can immediately add this top card to the meld you have on the table. Now, when you draw from the deck, you may draw a red 3. Now, a red 3 is special. If you draw a red 3, put it down the table, draw a card to replace it. The red 3 on your table will give you bonus points at the end of the game. Now, after you either pick up the pile or draw 2 cards, your turn begins. You can make as many melds and canastas on the table as you want, or as few as you want. And at the end of your turn, you must discard 1 card from your hand into the discard pile. This can be any card in your hand. So for example, this 6. If I discard this 6 onto the discard pile, my turn's done. Now, there are two kinds of special discards. Black 3s are special. Black 3 blocks the discard pile. When a black 3 is on the top of the discard pile, it can never be picked up. So if an opponent sees the black 3 on the top of the discard pile, he has to draw 2 cards from the deck instead of trying to pick up the pile. The other kinds of special discards are the 2s and the jokers, the wild cards in the game. If you discard one of them, you place them horizontally like so, and this pile is called frozen. When a discard pile is frozen, it stays frozen until it is finally picked up. However, a frozen pile is really hard to pick up. For example, say some other discards happen and the top card of the discard pile becomes a 10. And let's say that I hold these cards in my hand. Now, when the discard pile is frozen, it can only be picked up if you have 2 of the same cards as what's on the top of the discard pile. Usually, if this pile is not frozen, I can pick up the discard pile using this 10 and this joker, 10 and the wild, because I can make a meld with 10 joker and 10. But since it is frozen, I can only pick it up using 2 real 10s. So a frozen pile is very difficult to pick up, and it stays frozen until it is finally picked up. Now, when does the game end? There are 2 ways for the game to end. One, when the deck runs out of cards. So if you try to draw a card from the deck and there are no cards there, then the game ends immediately. Another one is if you have at least 2 canastas on the table and you run out of cards in your hand, then the game also ends. So for example, right now I have a meld of 6 aces and 6 10s on the table. I add an ace to this meld. That makes a canasta of aces. I add a 2 to this meld, and that makes a canasta of 10s. I meld these 5s from my hand, and I make a discard. Now I've run out of cards. I have at least 2 canastas, so the game ends. Now that you know the rules, let's see the game in action.
Hi, I'm Haotian, and this is my first time playing Canasta.
So, let's see Haotian's first time playing Canasta. Today, Haotian's opponent will be William. As you recall, Canasta is played with 2 decks of standard playing cards. In a game with 2 players, each player is dealt 15 cards to start. This will be the deck. We flip over the first card of the deck to create the discard pile. Since William dealt, it is Haotian's turn first. Now, Haotian does not have a 10 in his hand, so he cannot pick up the discard pile. So instead, he draws 2 cards from the deck. He melds his 3 5s. He decides to discard a jack. And now it is William's turn. William draws 2 cards on the deck. He discards an ace. Haotian has no ace in his hand, so he draws 2 cards. He discards a 7. Now the turn passes to William again. William discards a 5. Haotian picks up the discard pile since he can use the 5 into his current meld on the table. He discards a 7. The turn passes to William and he picks up 2 cards. He discards a king. Haotian decides to pick up the pile using a king and a wild from his hand. Now as time passes, now Haotian has 1 canasta already. Now Haotian only has 1 canasta still. He has 1 card in his hand which he cannot discard. Remember, you can only discard your last card if you have at least 2 canastas on the table, and that discard will end the game. So the turn just passes William. Now, with that last queen, Haotian completes his 2nd canasta. If he can now get rid of all the cards in his hand, he'll be able to end the game and claim victory.
Unfortunately, I can't. I can do this. I can put down.
Now, Haotian can get rid of all his cards and end the game. The game ends. Haotian has 2 canastas, William has none. Haotian clearly has more points.